One of the strangest, and I think probably to a lot of outside eyes, most bizarre practices that Catholics have is the practice of confessing sins to a priest. Catholics will go face to face or behind a screen like this, tell their sins to a priest, and then receive the absolution or the forgiveness of their sins. That practice brings up a question in a lot of people's minds, and it's a good question. Do I need to confess my sins to a priest? The short answer to that question, especially with respect to serious sins, yes, that's the answer to that question. But now I want to nuance that, and the nuance is very important. It's with respect to what Catholics believe the sacraments are. And the sacrament of reconciliation is one of these 7 special experiences that Catholics have. But I want to speak to that sacrament in particular. What sacraments are? Here's a great definition, and it's very short. It's in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Here's the definition of sacraments in general, and it'll help us understand this practice of the sacrament of confession. Sacraments are powers that come forth from the body of Christ, which is ever living and life-giving. Powers that come forth from the body of Christ. What power comes forth from the body of Christ in this sacrament? The power of forgiveness. Here's the image from the gospel that definition really comes from. It's from the Gospel of Mark. It's the story of the hemorrhaging woman. Just look at this analogy of this woman and how she experiences this power that comes forth from the body of Christ, because it's an image of how Catholics see this sacrament. Short version is, she's had this sickness, a hemorrhage for 12 years. She desires to be healed of that illness. She sees Jesus in this crowd, and she gets through the crowd, reaches out and touches the hem of his garment. And the gospel writer tells us power comes out of Jesus' body and heals her. Jesus turns to her, they have this little verbal exchange, and Jesus says, "Daughter, your faith has saved you. Go in peace and be cured of your affliction." What's going on there? Imagine this woman. She's been carrying the burden of this sickness, bleeding out, so to speak. We presume she has a relationship with God, but this illness is so compromising her in her own health in this example. And in Jesus, she finds this, and her touching him, his body, the hem of his garment, she experiences the power of his mercy, in this case, his healing power, to forgive her physically. That is the image that the Church uses to describe the sacrament of confession. What's the power of forgiveness? It's the forgiveness of sins. Well, what's a sin? It's a broken relationship with God. Therefore, what overcomes that broken relationship is reconciliation, coming back into contact with the one who's offended. God is the one who's offended in every sin. He's the primary offended party. That's why it's so shocking when Jesus starts forgiving sins, because people say, who can forgive sins but God alone? Well, imagine if I gave you $50, you didn't pay me back. Well, I alone can forgive that debt. So when Jesus forgives sins, he's speaking in the very person of God. When he forgives, this power of forgiveness is flowing forth from him. When someone is baptized, they receive forgiveness of sins. They're forgiven, they are reconciled to God. But we're still free to commit sins, big and small. Catholics believe that Jesus continues to forgive sins. And when we've committed a serious sin, he's given the church, which we say is his body, therefore the instrument through which his power of forgiveness can flow, he's given the power to forgive serious sins after baptism to the church, which he himself continues to exercise through priests. I think this is incredibly good news. Now, there's lots of reasons someone could go to confession. It's psychologically healing. You're reconciled with the community. You get things off your chest. That's all true. But The most important reason Catholics go to confession is to have serious sin forgiven by Jesus himself through the instrumentality of a priest. By that I mean, see this pen here? This is just a little analogy of what happens, this power that flows through the sacrament. A priest, this pen does not know English, obviously, but I can write the English language with it. I can write a little poem. My power of English speaking can flow through the pen onto a piece of paper. That's a little simple analogy for what happens through the sacrament of reconciliation. Jesus alone can forgive sins. That's what we call him, the high priest, by the way. He's the one mediator between heaven and earth. But he's so powerful that he can unleash that power, just like he unleashed the power of healing through his own clothes. Now he can unleash the power of forgiveness through an ordained priest in the Catholic Church. I think it's important to say that God is not bound by the sacraments. He can forgive people however and whenever he wants. He's unlimited in his power. But he's so good to us, just like he's so good to the woman in the gospel, that he wants us to access his power. In this case, his forgiving power. So what's the answer to the question? Do I have to go to priest for the forgiveness of my sins? Well, with respect to my serious sins, the answer is yes. That's the privilege the Catholics have. Do they have to confess their sins? Well, the answer is yes, but I think maybe the better way to look at it is we get to experience that. We have the privilege of experiencing the incredible power that flows through the body of Christ. In this case, the power of Jesus' divine forgiveness.